Today's video is brought to you by Cars and Bids.
The name
People be like, what is that 2000? Did you build that yourself, sir? You like that car?
I think that car is so cool looking.
Probably wasn't automatic then. Ugh. I'd have to do a manual swap.
It is shocking. It is shocking to look at.
I want to take it to the post office and mail stuff. This is Doug DeMuro.
And I am Kennan from Cars and Bids.
Ken Zoil.
Ken Zoil.
Today, we are talking about holy grail cars we want to drive. Cars we've never driven. Some I have driven of these, but I want to drive them more. Cars that we like really, desperately, deeply, excessively.
Yes, I yearn to have the keys in my hands. Kind of cars, yeah.
Not own necessarily.
No.
And in fact, none of the cars on my list do I want to own, more or less. But drive. You want to start?
I will start, yes. So
mine are insane.
So before, his list is going to be off the wall insane. I'm sure some of the cars I won't even know what they are.
I've driven a lot of cars, so
yeah, and
to get me excited, you got to be really...
Right. Now, I'm very fortunate. I used to work at an exotic car dealership, so I got to sample a lot of these cars. I did get to spend some seat time in them, but there are ones that I wanted to experience more. One of the
Wait, can I guess your number one?
Sure.
F50.
Yeah, 50. So I actually had one of the people I worked with at the time when it came in, he asked me if I've ever driven one. It's like, no, no one's ever driven an F50.
Hey, you ever driven one of these F50s?
I spent a lot of seat time in it, admittedly, like at the end of the day when things were getting quiet, we were getting ready to close the doors, I would go and sit in the car and just like imagine what it was like and just turn the key to see all like the gauges come on. And for me, that remains one of the epitome cars. I just think they're so cool. And everybody who's driven one tells me they're not nearly as intimidating as they look. Because it looks insane.
Drove great.
Yeah. And
great clutch, great shifter. Felt small.
I did play with the clutch and the shifter, and it felt like really easy. So I think, and I know it was described once as a vibrating pile driver of a car, but I want to experience, the transmission as a loaded member of the chassis. I just think it's so cool. And to experience that car, and again, one I don't have to own, where I can have that experience. And I'm also going to remove worry from this whole thing, because that's a very expensive car. Yeah. So this is just purely hypothetical. But if I could then hand the keys back after getting to do my thing and live that dream.
That was amazing. I wish I had enjoyed it a little bit more. The F50, I think, is the underappreciated Ferrari supercar. I don't think it's undervalued, but I think it's underappreciated. Everybody talks F40. F50 on paper is kind of cooler than the F40.
Right. Like V12, manual transmission, convertible and a hardtop, and just like Formula One technology in the car. Like,
and it was actually good to drive, which the F40, let's be honest.
Well,
like they put brakes in it, allegedly. But the F50 was like legitimately a good car to drive. I think the F50 is maybe the best Ferrari supercar, but it's not talked about it like that because it was kind of ugly and because it was like sort of just a pure profit play as opposed to F40 is like the 40th birthday and Enzo's last car, blah, blah, blah.
Well, and the F40 was just an icon. And to whatever album follows that up is not going to be quite the same. But for some of us who like those kind of B-side things, and the F50 is that, but it's just such a cool car. And getting to spend time around and all the cool details, and also having spent time around an F40, how much better built the F50 is comparatively. I mean, the F40 is, it's sacrilege, but it is kind of kit car feeling.
It's crazy that only 7 years separates those cars.
It is amazing. It was like two different companies.
Light years. Different. Okay. Mine are insane, like I said. F50 is a great one. I actually would put that on my list too if I hadn't already driven one. It would be near the top. It's so cool. I wish I got more seat time.
Your top up was when the top was up when you drove it though. Well, so had to have that down.
It didn't count.
You get the full experience.
Okay, mine are all insane. Bentley Dominator. Actually, I'm going to give my number one.
Wow, you're just going to go for it.
Yeah. The Italdesign Columbus.
Oh. Yes, the Italdesign.
For those of you who don't know, which I hope is everyone, because merely looking at an image of this vehicle will ruin your day. The Italdesign Columbus was a 2-story minivan. You, at home, your minivan probably has only 1 story. The Columbus was a split level. And it was I had 14 seats or some large amount of seats. And it was powered by like a BMW V12. And my understanding of the whole project was BMW kind of was a partner of it until they saw it. And then they were like, we don't take our name off this thing. But But I like weird stuff, and to me, this is like the peak weird. And Teledesign still owns this car, and I was actually talking to them about filming with it in Italy, but I couldn't make it work. But I want to buy it. Unfortunately, shipping it here would require its own. It's like 46 feet long. The only press photos of it are like a dude on a bicycle looking at it like, what the hell? And I kind of think it wasn't staged like that. I think he was really, they were like, oh, let's get this guy's reaction. And his reaction was, this is the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yep.
But I've always wanted. I talked to Kennan about the Columbus.
Yeah, it's a trope in our friend group that he should buy an Teledesign Columbus. Because imagine that just parked like at Cars and Coffee. Nobody would know what to do with that. You'd be able to recreate that bicycle picture very easily.
Oh yeah, everybody at Cars and Coffee would walk away from the F40s and the F50s and say, I want to see a 2-level van.
Didn't it also have like a center seating position or something crazy like
if
that?
If it didn't, it should have.
It should have, yeah.
I think the seats swiveled to the upper level seats. The lower level
Right,
seats.
to be clear, we have to decide which level. We'll talk about which level the seats are, like a 747.
I think that would be
car.
cool to drive. And I presume you're rowing your own. And so you're shifting gears in a V12 BMW 2-story van. Is that the same powertrain McLaren F1? I'm gonna look this up.
It'd be the 8 Series and 7 Series engine at that time, which was the basis for the engine that came in the McLaren F1.
So what you're saying is yes.
But what you would say is that yes, you'd say it's the
if I got
same
an Teledesign
drive.
Columbus, I would be like, yeah, it has the McLaren F1 engine.
Hey man, if you buy this thing, you can say whatever you like. I'm here for it. I would love to ride around in that. However, I would not want to be here when it breaks.
Wait, it's a 5-liter V12. Was that 850 CSI engine? Or it's probably just the 850i?
It's just the 850i.
Probably wasn't automatic then. Ugh. I'd have to do a manual swap.
Plus, I'm sure this car hasn't run in decades, so I'm sure it needs everything. And you would put a different
I would be stunned if it ran even then.
Right. They just put the engine in there, didn't hook anything up to it.
I'd be shocked.
Was it ever displayed anywhere?
It was. It was displayed at the show where they announced it.
Geneva.
And then my hope and my presumption and hope is that it was put in the basement, never to be shown to people again.
Right, that has kind of has a nice story to it. It was hidden away from the public, never to be seen again.
Oh, I
until
forgot.
Doug bought it.
They named it Columbus because it was like a big. They like leaned into the fact that it was a huge people mover, and they named it Columbus because it was like a ship going to a new.
Well, they were certainly exploring new levels of design with that thing. It really is. It is shocking. It is shocking to look at. I think it would be so cool. I would love it if you get it. It would be so difficult to get it here, but man, seeing that at Cars and Coffee. You talked with Alance about cars that would win Cars and Coffee.
Oh yeah, that would win.
That would be a windmill dunk.
VHS player in the back. All right, what do you got next?
So cool. So F50 was one of the cars I always wanted to experience. Another car, again, kind of on the same level of supercar.
Seal cage GTR.
No. For me, I've always
Damn.
very cool, but no. So for me, Veyron. Like I have never experienced the 16-cylinder shove of a Veyron.
Oh.
And I love the idea of cars that offer like really unique experiences and being able to point that on a highway and just go.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it's like. I've watched the Chris Harris video when it was new. When he drove it on the Autobahn, like with a GT3 RS as a film car, and just watching him just pull away. It was like it's just a cheat code, that car. And again, growing up, that was a seminal car. And for me to be able to experience that at speed would be mind blowing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I've driven a bunch of them and Chiron's. It's so cool.
Yeah.
It is so cool.
Yeah.
And it was just like such a childhood icon. It was just like the Veyron.
Right. And admittedly, like I didn't, for a while, I think it's a lot of car enthusiasts who kind of railed against that car because it became like a pop culture thing whenever you'd ask somebody what car do you want. Oh, it's the most expensive. I want a Veyron. And it's like, or I want a Bugatti. Wake up in a new Bugatti.
Exactly right. And so car enthusiasts at the time were like, that's stupid.
But for me, like as someone who really appreciates engineering and having watched like all the videos of engineers talking about the engine and the transmission and all this stuff, like to get to experience that, well, again, like it is a
truly
Concord
special
car, and just to feel that torque and that shove would be.
Oh, and the fact that it just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling.
Right.
Car enthusiasts in the mid 2000s were stupid. The F40s were 250, and they thought the Veyron was bad. I would have been way better in the mid 2000s.
If only we could go back and had money. We had the taste, but didn't have the money at the time.
Those people were dumb. I belong there, and I wish I could have just been like, I'm buying an F40, Carrera GT at 250. Yeah, they were. I agree. Like, if you haven't driven one, it is so special. You get in that car, you press the unlock button from a Passat, you open the door handle from a Golf, you put the key into the thing and press the starter button from a Touareg, and you feel. No, that's not all true. I think none of that is true, actually, except the key fob, I think. But it is a really special car.
Yeah, we agreed.
And it was a really special moment in the car. I agree with you. Mm-hmm. Here's a vehicle that was not a special car or a special moment, but it is on my list. The Maybach Accelero. Do you remember that?
Oh, of course. Yes, definitely.
This was, for those of you who don't know, Maybach in the 2000s came out, and they came out with this big sedan that just looked like an S-Class. It had all the imagination a German would put in. The Phantom came out at the same time and was so much more insane. And then Maybach comes out and no one can tell it apart from an S-Class, and the company failed. And so then they had to just, now they're trim levels of regular Mercedes. But the hope was to make them their own brand. And so, as a last-ditch effort to make them cool, they came out with a coupe called the Accelero. And it was cool.
It was so cool looking.
So cool.
That it's like in car books of that time, like it was one of the cars, like they get to the back and it's like, whoa, what is this
What is this? And the answer is nothing. Because it was a concept car, and of course, being the Germans they were, they didn't put this into production, the actual cool one. Instead, they put a larger S-Class.
Right.
For $380,000, and no one bought that. But I would, if I drove this around,
it's just so sinister looking. It's so good.
Yeah.
That's a very good choice.
Such a cool car. It probably just drives like a Mercedes from that era, because even though the Germans were able to summon up a little bit of moxie for the exterior design, I'm sure the interior was like lifted straight from a regular one, and the powertrain and all that.
That probably is a better car to park and look at as opposed to actually being.
But you know what? I wouldn't even care, because I would drive it around and I would just be like, yup. Oh, you got a Veyron. Accelero.
The name
People be like, what is that? 2000? Did you build that yourself, sir?
I feel like you'd have to say it a specific way to Accelero. Like you just say it like
I have an Accelero.
Or you'd roll a letter in there somewhere, I'm sure.
Accelero.
Accelero.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
That would be great. And the cool thing about driving that would not be the experience of driving it, but the experience of showing up everybody else who thinks they're cool.
Right. Which I have a car that, my next car is kind of in that vein. This one's a little more, if you know, you have to know, but I saw it on Top Gear back then and I always wondered. And that was the Volkswagen Golf W12, where they put a 12-cylinder engine from Bentley in a Golf. And they gave it these huge, wide flares.
Because it was mid-engine.
Right, yeah, it was And
it was the Continental GT's powertrain.
It might be the most mid-engine car I can think of, because the engine's literally directly behind you. Like
the most mid-engine, that's true though. It's like the middle was the engine. It wasn't, there was the middle of the car had an engine in it. It was like all the middle of the car was engine. They had to flare out the whole body because the engine couldn't be contained.
Right, there's a picture, there's a frame in that film where they have it parked next to a normal one, and it's shocking how much wider it is.
Oh my God, this is such a good one, and it's made me think of a couple others I'm going to write down.
Great, but I think, and like that car, even when they drove it, was half-baked, and it didn't handle very well, but you say the Germans don't have a sense of humor. I think that car proves it. They're like, what can we do this time? I don't we take that big engine, put in a little Golf, and they just shoehorned the thing in there. They gave it, I think it had a Gallardo like brakes and like the subframe from one or something like that, but it was like a combination of all the different like companies that VW owned at the time.
I love the fact though that even in spite of all this, the exterior styling is pretty subtle. Like it is wider, of course, but it still has regular GTI wheels.
Yes.
And the badge up front is GTI, and then underneath in small letters, W12. Oh, by the way, this GTI has 650 horse from the factory.
Right, so you and your Accelera, I'm going to show up, and it's like, cool, you got a Golf, so do I. I would just, yeah, I've got a Golf, it's great.
Dude, okay, that's a great one. Also, that must be insane to drive, and terrible probably.
I'm sure awful, and especially that era, it's probably on thin, run-flat tires, so probably no grip whatsoever. If you could make it like work, and I think it may have been the early stages of the dual clutch gearbox.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, I don't know. I bet they put in the same trans from the Continental GT, which is just a nice, smooth
auto. But in this car, I mean, God only knows. I'm sure it's not that great to drive, but what a cool car. And I've always been curious at like, what does that shove feel like in a Golf? Like it looks like a Golf, and you're just
What were they thinking?
It was built for a specific like.
Did 0 to 60 in 3.5, and it hit 201 miles an hour.
It's just crazy.
And it was rear-wheel drive.
Crazy vehicle. Well, I mean, yeah, try to make an all-wheel drive system work with that engine, like in that tiny of a car.
Yeah, it would have been hard. Okay, that was a great one. Cool. And because you said that, I've changed my next one. We're not talking about any like regular cars here.
No, well, of course, it's all about experiences.
The Nissan Juke R.
Oh,
do you remember that car?
I do remember that car.
They took a Nissan Juke, which was I always thought was kind of a cute little crossover, and they put in the entire powertrain and drivetrain from a GTR.
Yeah.
For God only knows what reason. And then they tried to sell them. They sold like 30 or 20 or maybe 12 for like $1 million. It's just like, wait a minute, I can make this in my backyard. You and me could knock one out in like an afternoon. So let's just stick it in there. That was a cool car. They didn't sell them here.
Cool car. That's a very cool car. I mean, the GTR drivetrain is fabulous, and I love these cars. Like, you know, again with that Volkswagen of putting a really crazy performance engine, and not necessarily a performance E car.
Yeah.
This is one of the greats.
Yeah, it was a ridiculous vehicle. It looks awesome too. Unlike that Golf, they did a pretty good job of like GTR-ifying this thing and being like, okay, this is real.
GT. Admittedly, I am not a huge fan of the way the Juke looks. I always thought it looked weird even back then.
But what if your Juke looked like that?
What if it had a wing and a GTR engine? That is, man, imagine launch control. That thing would be crazy.
Apparently, Car and Driver has a headline, 17 may be built. And they built 6 already, and the sticker price was $600,000.
I wonder where these cars, who owns these? Who bought them, and where are they now? Like, they can't be, who? Like, it's crazy.
On this subject, by the way, I'm going to leapfrog ahead of you and do another one of these since you started this brilliant tiny car with a big engine from the factory.
We're off to the races.
Signet, the one Signet they built with the V8.
V8, yeah, that'd be
incredible. I would give anything to drive that car, but the dude who had him build it made him agree he would buy it and have him pay the development costs if they agree they would not build another. So there's only ever going to be the one.
I would imagine he still has it too. He's like,
but I bet he wants some real cash for that car.
Oh, of course. I mean, why wouldn't
rather than the $87,000 it's worth, I suspect he wants like real money.
God, that is such an expensive, tiny.
If you could have the Juke R, the Signet V8, or the Golf W12, which would you?
For me, the Golf. I like big cylinder count. That's what it's all about.
Don't you think the Juke R would beat you now?
Of course it would, but I mean, look at it.
W12 Golf.
Look at it. I think that W12 Golf and just like parked side by side, you know, just somewhere. Which imagine that you go to a restaurant, see those two just there. Like, who are these people?
Honestly, one of the reasons I like these cars, these 3 specific ones that we're talking about right now, is like, if you're buying these, you're like post F40 and Enzo. Like all that stuff is too pedestrian for you. You're on the level of buying a W12 Golf because you need that level of stuff to give you a thrill. Like I got F40, all my buddies have F40s. Like that's whatever. I got a W12 Golf. Nobody's got one of those.
Yeah.
That is like the insane thing about these cars.
It's operation at a completely different level.
Right.
I can only imagine. I mean, I would be happy with just an F40, to be clear.
Yeah,
but,
no, of course. But you meet a dude with an F40 and you're on W12 Golf level and you're like, oh.
That'd be 1,300 of those. It's like
1,300?
Maybe one of these, you know.
See these around at shows, but mine is one of 1. Or one of 6 as the case of the Juke R. Or maybe up to 17.
Right. So I'm going to do my next one, which was a concept car that I wish they had made, but they didn't. And that's the Lamborghini Estoque.
You liked that car?
I think that car is so cool looking. It had a lot of elements that ended up in the Aventador, and it was, of course, Reventon era. But I've always thought those cars looked so cool. And, you know, for a time, they really were going to consider and build this car, but instead they decided to go with the SUV route, and they ended up scrapping this thing. But I've always looked at that car and thought it was just so cool. And I don't remember what engine they were going to put in it. There was talks they were going to do
Gallardo
V10,
yeah,
which would have been again another V10 sedan.
Yeah,
there just aren't that many of them.
Yeah,
but also a Lamborghini V10. Like I think that would be.
Yeah, I remember seeing these. I saw one of these on the on the lawn at Pebble one year. They must have brought it for something. It looked cool.
Yeah, I've always thought they look cool. Admittedly, not as insane as the Golf.
Right now, I'm just sitting here thinking about like the Juke R and the Golf W12.
I know, I got a punch.
Nothing else is gonna be as cool as those.
They are pretty cool. But this for me has been a car like I've always been really curious about. Like if they had built that, what would that have driven like? It would just be cool.
Yeah, I agree. Can I do another concept car? Should we
Sure,
move back to
sure.
normal cars? After this, can you move back to a normal car?
I can go.
Because we're over here talking about cars that weren't built. It's like, yeah, we all want to drive these.
Well, yeah, because I'll tell you what, because they weren't built, you can imagine how great they drive, and
That's true. That's the benefit of the Golf W12. You don't actually have to drive it and discover that it's probably trash.
Right.
Like when you drive an F40, you're on this car doesn't have any brakes and it overheats and all that. But Golf W12, you can just sit there and think about.
Yeah, this video should have been cars.
Great.
This video should have been cars we love the concept of.
Yeah.
Basically. But yes, continue.
Okay, I'm gonna do one more concept car. Then I'm gonna hope that you take it back to cars that people can actually use.
Yes.
Cadillac CN.
Ah, the CN.
I mentioned this car in a lot of these videos, I feel like, because it was so cool. First off, I always felt it was beautiful. For those of you who don't know, it was a Cadillac supercar concept car. The goal was, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was this thought that a halo car would really help revitalize your lineup and bring people in the doors of your showrooms. It only ever really successfully worked for Audi. But Cadillac tried. Lexus tried, didn't really work. Cadillac tried it as a concept car, but they didn't make it. But it had a 7.5 liter Northstar V12. So even more head gasket problems than the regular. No, they would have solved all that. But I always just thought it looked so cool.
Yeah,
and
it
a
does.
7.5 liter V12, like,
Why? Yeah.
boom!
Yeah.
You got forced induction in your Golf W12. I got 7.5 liter naturally aspirated. They also claim it makes 750 horsepower. Of course, they could have claimed it made any amount of horsepower. It was a concept car, probably never ran.
Yeah.
It stopped at 750.
Exactly. Oh, there's no replacement for displacement, you know.
Yeah, 7.5 big, 7.5.
That's
Don't
a
you
cool
think
car.
this thing looks cool?
Oh, it looks so cool.
Do you remember this?
I do remember that car. Yeah, that looks so cool. That and like the Cadillac concept of that era, the 16
Yeah.
as well, I thought was
Cadillac
very
had some
cool.
truly great concept cars from this era, and then they built the SRX. So
Right. There's a little discrepancy. The design department was having a great time in that era.
actually, I think all the Cadillacs from that era looked good,
Yeah.
but some of the cars were trash. Not all of them, but some of them were trash.
Right. Well, they took these design elements and really what they ended up doing was the XLR. Was like their most
The XLR,
concept-y
which
like production car.
honestly, kind of like.
I
It's a
saw
guilty pleasure car, actually.
I saw one the other day and I thought, man, that is cool looking.
Apparently, by the XLR era, they had solved the Northstar issues too. Regardless, this thing would be so cool. If I could drive around in a Cadillac CN, honestly, I think if they had released this, would have been one of the most beautiful supercars of its era, of the mid-2000s. Even factoring in this, the Ford GT, all those, the Enzo, which looked like a cricket, like all those cars.
Looked like a
Did
cricket.
it not look like a cricket?
It did look like a cricket, but I don't know if
Grasshopper, maybe?
I wish they had made it. It would have been cool to have another. It would also, as an American, it would have been cool to have another American supercar other than Ford GT, which is just spectacular. But
What a mistake not making this. It says on Wikipedia there were plans put in production, but due to a question of the very existence of a customer base, they didn't do it. And so they canceled it. And it's like, man, the Ford GT shows up and now they sell
Right.
an icon for
Don't
decades.
forget, in period, this was a hard car to sell.
Yeah.
If this was hard,
everything was
imagine-
hard to sell. I mean,
Cadillac
nobody knew.
people.
Also, they were planning on putting an auto in this, so that GM is always so perfect at screwing stuff up. They couldn't even get the concept car right.
Imagine walking into a showroom though to pick up an STS and like,
Oh
that's
my
sitting
god,
next
this
to
is so cool. This is sitting there. Oh, what engine's in this? 7.5 V12.
Man, it would have been so
Okay,
cool.
get us back to real
All right,
cars.
real cars. This is a car I have driven, and I've proclaimed that I really love them, despite some of their driving foibles. But Lexus LFA, for me, that car is a car I never got to fully. I did get to drive one to a photo shoot when I worked at an exotic car dealership, and I remember just how quickly it revved. I remember because as I was driving away, very quickly did one of those because it just spins up so fast. But the sound of that car is so impressive, and being able to spend more time in one of those to me would be very cool. Now, granted, you're going to say that the transmission is awful, Kennan. It's horrible.
That's one of the things I would say.
Yeah, but I think I really love those cars. I think they're so special. And again, another Top Gear episode I remember really well. And they did the anime sort of thing where it was part animated and part Richard driving it on the track. And I just thought that car was so cool. And just to experience that sound, be in control of that sound, I think would be great.
Most overvalued car on sale today.
Well, maybe, but the market thinks that's what it's worth, so that's what it's worth.
That's true. Actually, I'm wrong. The market is the ultimate decider.
Yeah.
But
hey, I brought it back to reality with a Lexus LFA.
I'm gonna bring it back to unreality again.
We like living more in your fever dream of
Here's a car I've driven and I loved and I want it. And I want it when I bought this car. I really wanted a McLaren P1 GTR.
Yeah.
But I can't afford it because it's like $3 million.
Not only that, like there's no way you could get that car in this garage.
Let me tell you something. I would do it.
Scrape it.
And I would show up and be like, mm. The thing I love about the P1 GTR, I drove a road one on the street in Newport Beach. I've never felt anything so hardcore in my entire life. You could just hear the induction noise. It was so cool. And I'm not a McLaren guy, really. Like, they make a lot of cars that are the same in my mind, but that wasn't the same. And you show up in an LFA and I show up on a P1 GTR.
Yeah, I would doff my hat to you. That would, but, you know, and then I get back in my air-conditioned car with my Mark Levinson sound system and just relax on the way home. Listen to my V10 tick away. Meanwhile, you got to get in and, you know, make sure not to hit the fire suppression thing because that goes off. Your whole day's ruined.
And it's one of those cars. It's one of those cars with bars everywhere because it's got a roll cage.
Oh, Ken, it was great to see you. Thanks. See you next week. And then you gotta go click. I mean, it's just a lot of work. Then you gotta flip switches. I mean, man, all right,
you put in work.
Yeah. To reap the reward.
To reap the reward, which is you then get beat up while you're driving.
Right. The point with that, Chris, don't you think that would be a better experience on a track? Like, I don't know, it was designed to be before Lanzante made it road legal.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I don't live at a track. I want to take it to the post office and mail stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking
That's
about.
an incredibly cool car. The driving experience like that. I remember your video on that, and like
I was obsessed. I showed up that day thinking I hate doing race cars because they're so. To do a video, I climbed in and out of the car 20 times, and climbing in and out of race cars is hell. And I was thinking to myself, I do not want to be here. I do not want to film this. I hate filming race cars. And then I drove it, and I was like, this is the craziest thing I have ever experienced in my life, and I want one of these. But I don't have one.
We had dinner that night when you came back. I mean, you were just like buzzing and would not stop talking about it. He would just be laying there like by the pool and just be like, GTR. Yeah. So yeah, that's a great one. But so on that topic, this is kind of more of a general thing that I want to do. So speaking of race cars, I have never actually done a track day of any kind, never done any track driving at all, and I really want to. But one of the things I really want to learn to drive is a single seater. I've always wanted to experience like a real purpose-built race car. And I've been curious what that's like. I would love to be able to, you know, I'm not Senna, I love Formula One, but I'd like to get like just a hint of what it must be like to drive one of those cars. So driving a single-seater race car of some form on a racetrack for me would be like a pivotal automotive experience.
You've never done a track day?
Never done a track day, no.
That's what I said.
In the fall, we're doing a track day.
We're doing a track day, all right. I would love to. I just have never had an opportunity to, and like it just never worked out that way. So
Will you bring your M5 if we do this?
Sure, I will bring my M5. Yes.
Legitimately?
Yes, I will. I will bring the M5. We have to have one car that'll make it back, but you know.
We're gonna trailer. I'll bring this if you bring your M5.
Deal. You got a deal. I'll bring.
And there's our video. Cars, holy grail cars we most want to drive. Your takeaway from this should be the Ital Design Columbus. That would be a great car for a track day. Screaming BMW V12.
Mid-engine. Goodbye.